Hey guys, welcome to 12 Tone. Today we're going to talk about scales. Wait, didn't we already do that? Well, okay, we talked about what scales were, and we talked about variations of the minor scale. Oh, and we covered modes, which is a whole group of scales, but there are just so many scales out there, and today we're going to talk about a couple more popular ones. The first group I want to talk about is what are called pentatonic scales. As the name implies, these are scales with 5 notes. Now, technically any 5-note scale counts as pentatonic, but usually when we use the term, we're referring to one of two scales, major pentatonic or minor pentatonic. These look a little different, but they operate on the same basic principle, removing dissonant intervals from common scales. While different people hear things differently, it's generally accepted that the 3 most dissonant intervals in the standard 12-note regime are the tritone, the minor second, and the major seventh. So to make a major or minor pentatonic scale, we take the regular major or minor scale and remove the 2 notes of tritone apart. In major, this is the 4 and the 7. In minor, the 2 and the flat 6. Not coincidentally, these are also each a half step away from another scale degree, so removing them clears out our other problematic intervals as well. This gives us a scale that feels at rest from top to bottom. Major pentatonic especially is often used in film scoring to convey a sense of home and belonging. Pentatonic scales don't really have strong dominant or subdominant functions, as those rely on the tensions created by dissonant intervals, so they're best used when, for whatever reason, you don't want your piece to have much forward motion. A really cool variation on pentatonics is the blues scale. Now, there are a couple different things called blues scales, but I'm going to talk about the most popular one. It's really simple. We just take the minor pentatonic and add a note between the 4 and the 5. This note is a tritone above the root, giving it a sharp, harsh, emotionally raw sound. Interestingly, this scale, despite having a minor third, is often used over dominant chords, giving it a slightly out-of-tune feel. Another group of scales I want to talk about are what I like to call uniform scales. These are scales where every scale degree is the same interval apart. If you go by whole step, you get what's perhaps uncreatively called the whole tone scale. This isn't a great scale to write in because if you harmonize it, it's all augmented triads. Personally, I think the best use of the whole tone scale is as a demonstration for why our usual scales include half steps. It does have some uses as a dominant scale, but I don't like it. There are better scales for that. If you instead go by half step, then your scale contains all 12 notes. This is what we call the chromatic scale. Think of it like a color wheel. These are all the colors you can choose from. Like whole tone, you probably don't really want to write in the chromatic scale. Honestly, if you do, it probably won't sound like a scale. At that point, it's basically atonal, like we discussed in our video about 12-tone composition. There's nothing wrong with that, but the point of scales is the structure they provide, and using all 12 notes kinda defeats that purpose. Speaking of structure, that brings us to our last scale for today. And yeah, it's the coolest one. I'm talking about altered. If you watched our modes video, you may have noticed that even Locrian, the flattest of them, only had 5 notes flat. Why not a 6th? Why not flat every single note? Well, as so often happens when I ask rhetorical questions, we can, and it's called altered. You can think of it as Locrian with a flat 4, or just major with a flat everything. But there's something funny that happens when you flat the 4th degree, because it's only a half step above the major third already. This gives us a really dark, minor scale that still has a major third in it. In fact, between the major third and the minor 7th, we have the makings of a dominant scale, and that's how altered is most often used. We still need to do a video about those, don't we? Yeah, we do. Stay tuned. For now, those are some scales. Try the exercises, join our mailing list for updates and scans of all our episodes, and keep on rockin'.